Hello, Professor, and hello, class. Today, first, I'd like to introduce my audience, a co-worker and a friend of mine, Kyle Comtois, and his wife, Brittany, and their daughter, Rosalie. At this time, I'm going to be giving an informative speech on how to properly set up your scuba diving equipment. Whether you're diving in just 5 feet of water or 80 feet of water, it is important that you do a proper safety check and you assemble your gear correctly as to make sure that we don't have any malfunctions underwater. I have approximately 40 dives both throughout the military and through recreational diving, and there have been a few incidences where checking your gear prior to getting in the water could have saved personnel from receiving what we call the bends, and that's just a nitrogen buildup of air bubbles within their bloodstream. So at this point, I'd like to transition and walk us into the first inspections that we're going to do with our dive equipment. We start normally from head to toe, so the first thing we're going to check is the mask. At this point, we want to ensure that there are no cracks amongst any of our mask material and that our seal is not torn, ripped in any way or frayed, and that it's not tacky to the touch. That means the rubber's starting to give away. Next thing we want to inspect is our tank of air. The only very important piece of this that we really want to inspect is the O-ring on here, which is going to give a proper seal to our octopus, which we will inspect later. The next piece we want to check is our buoyancy control device. At here we have a bunch of buckles and all the equipment that's going to help it secure itself to our bodies, and we want to ensure that all of these don't have any broken pieces, broken chips or anything, or that there's any tears in the fabric, as this has to withstand pressures of the water and both be able to hold the air. The last thing that we're going to check is what we call the octopus. And the octopus consists of the K valve adapter, the regulator inflator, your dive computer, and both your main and your alternate regulator in case you run into an emergency underwater. You just want to make sure that it's free floating and that we have no cracks in any of the rubber components at all. Now that our equipment is inspected, we're ready to start the setup. First thing we want to do is we want to ensure that our tank of air has the O-ring facing away from us. We remove the safety cap and we take the buoyancy control device, which has our fittings for the scuba tank in the back. We want to ensure that this slides over top of the tank nice and loosely so that we have a catch that is predetermined on how long that this needs to be. And this slips over top of our valve, and what this does is this ensures that our head is free to move backwards and side to side without bumping the back of our necks and our heads into our regulators. Once this piece is on, there's a secure buckle in the back that's a Velcro strap, and we tighten this tank and Velcro it down so that when we pick up our tank, everything comes together and nothing should be separated. At this point, we then take our regulator. And with the regulator, we're going to slip it over the K valve, and we only move it in to where it's finger tight. We don't want to over tighten this. And then we take our regulator control device and we slip it down and we make the connection to our inflators. Once we heard the click in the inflator, the next thing we want to do is pressurize the system. Now we want to pressurize this very slowly to make sure that we don't have a blowout with any excess air. So we start by slowly turning on the air. You can hear it seal, and you can feel everything stiffen up, all the hoses, as they are now pressurized with approximately 2,900 pounds of air. We then open our tanks the whole way, and you back it off 1/4 turn. And that's just to make sure that we have the proper amount of airspace that's going to be going through there. Now, some of the things that we want to check to make sure that our regulators are hooked up correctly is that our vest inflates and deflates properly. So with the inflation button, we're going to continue to press this until our vest is completely full with air. And I'm going to push it until I start hearing air seep out of my regular valves. Once you hear that sound, you know that your valves are working properly and that you cannot overinflate your vest and or damage anything. The next thing we want to check is our regulators. We want to make sure that there's no air seeping out of these, and we want to make sure that there's air, actual breathable air coming through them, and you can do that by testing the buttons in the front. That one sounds good. And then along with your spare, because just because you might not use it, a buddy that you're diving with may need it later if he starts to run out of air on the bottom. Pressurize is very good. And the last thing you want to check is your dive computer. And the dive computer is set up and it tells me that I'm currently operating with 2,900 pounds of air, and that is approximately good enough for 1 hour of recreational dive time. Now that we have properly set up our scuba equipment and we've done all of our safety checks, I do believe we're ready for the water. At this time, this concludes my speech.